Noob School. All right, welcome back to Noob School. Today I've got, I think I could probably say my favorite podcast guest, Brother Dan.
I think you said that to the last guy too, to
No,
Peter.
I did not. Brother Dan Sterling is back for his second visit to the Noob School. So welcome back, Dan.
Thank you. Exciting time to be here.
Yep. Dan has been, we're going to talk a little bit about Dan's wild ride in the telecom world since he got out of college. And of course, we're going to end up with where he is now. But Dan, Dan's a Gamecock.
Yes, I am.
In South Carolina.
Yep.
And you graduated in 91?
Yep.
91.
We always win the tailgate. We're really good at tailgating.
Tailgating, that's good. That's good. And when you got out, it hadn't been that long since AT&T had been forced to break up kind of their monopoly, right?
Correct. 1984 is when AT&T was forced to break up.
Okay.
And it created huge opportunity.
I was already in the software business in Greenville, and you entered the telecom business, which I think those two businesses, our business, Data Stream, and then what you got into, CTG, Corporate Telemanagement Group, were the two kind of hot spaces for young salespeople.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Leighton Cubbage, Charlie Hauser had started CTG, and they had a lot of our friend Ted Hassel and David Hudson and Eddie Terrell. A lot of our friends were there already.
Yep.
And you knew you wanted to work there.
Absolutely.
And Leighton said, "We don't have a spot for you."
He did say that. He did. And I listened to him for a little while, and then I decided that wasn't going to work for me.
You just said, "I'm going to be there on Monday, and you pay me when you're ready."
I called him on a Sunday night, and I said, I wasn't calling him Cub because I didn't know him that well yet. But
Yeah.
I said, "Mr. Cubbage, this is Dan Sterling. I understand there's a job for me, but I'm starting tomorrow." And he started laughing, and that led to about 3 more phone calls where I just said, "I'm starting tomorrow. I'll clean the bathrooms, take out the trash, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But this is the place I want to be.
Okay.
And pay me whenever you want."
Yeah. It's amazing how often that approach works, where you just won't give up. You won't say, "Well, okay, I'll look somewhere else." You're like, "I found my spot. I'm coming." I had a guy one time, John Fridella,
Yep.
who for whatever reason, he didn't pass a certain test we gave him. So we were very strict about these psychological tests. He didn't pass it. He had a different profile. And I told him, "Sorry, but I like you, but we're not going to take you." He said, "Well, I'm going to call you every day until you hire me." I'm like, "Well, call if you want to, So he called, no kidding, every day for 50 days. And every day I was polite, and I said, "Sorry, I told you it's not going to work out." Day 51, we'd had like 3 people quit. Mm-hmm. We had open recs. We had nobody on the bench. And I was like, "Okay, we'll give you a try."
There you go. Why
yeah,
not?
yeah. And so anyway.
I think he was probably like me. I found the spot with a bunch of motivated people
Yeah.
that seemed to be going in a common direction. And it seemed to all trust and like each other and have fun.
Yeah.
And I said, I got to be there because all other places I was talking to didn't have that atmosphere of
Right.
not only fun but work hard.
Yeah, so you knew it was a good place, good industry, and you knew a lot of the people that were already there, so it was kind of an easy pick for you to go there. But that effectively put you in the telecom space, which you've been in since 91, so that's like 30 years, right?
Yep. Telecom and cloud.
The cloud. And interesting enough, it wasn't, it was, for the most part, your career has been managing telecom through a channel, right?
Correct.
Through other distributors?
Well, through agents. And,
Okay.
and my definition of an agent is somebody who's worked for a telecom or cloud company, and one day, in most cases, their bosses made them mad.
Yeah.
And they walked out of the door because they knew they had some customers they could put
Yeah.
on somebody else
Yeah.
and start making residual income.
So they might have been working for AT&T
Yep.
or Charter,
Yeah, or Windstream,
Windstream.
or Green Cloud, or any company like that.
and they had good relationships because they became an agent. So they're now selling for someone like you, but not as a direct employee, as a distributor or an agent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They're very much, John, like an independent insurance agent. Somebody like our friend Bubba Watts,
Yeah.
who represents a lot of different insurance companies.
Yeah.
And then he gets paid money based on who he points the customer to, the end user customer. And so that's what these guys do.
Okay. And so CTG eventually gets bought by a company called LCI.
Correct.
What's that stand for?
I can't remember.
LCI.
been a long time ago.
It was a big payday.
Yeah, it was a great payday.
And you stayed on with LCI and just kept doing what you were doing, right?
Yeah, I stayed on for probably 3 or 4 years.
And did your territory change?
They kept trying to make my territory change because I had the northeast part of the United
Yeah.
States. And when LCI bought us, they were like, "That's stupid. We don't want you flying up there. We'll let one of our people up
Yeah.
there handle it." And I said, "That's fine, but I don't think my customers are going to like that very much." And so the customers pretty much told them we want to work with him. And it worked out. It worked out great for the first 4 years. And then Russell Powell, who was one of the guys who was with me at CTG, and I were sitting there one day, and they were making some decisions we didn't like and not taking care of. You know, we worked with these agents, but not only were they our agents, they were our friends.
Yeah.
And when they started making decisions that were bad for them, we were like, we can't be a part of it. And so we called Leighton Cubbage and told Leighton what was going on, because Leighton had pretty much left by then. And Leighton literally was over at my house within 30 minutes under this tree. I'll never forget it. And he got so mad when we told him what was going on that he called his stockbroker and sold a big chunk of stock right then. And it made the LCI people so bad, because normally when you sell that much stock, you pre-plan it.
Yeah.
But we left that day.
You left that day.
Yep.
Now, LCI eventually got bought by Quest, right?
Yep.
And then Quest eventually got bought by CenturyLink.
Correct.
So far in your career as a Gamecock working in telecom, every single place you've worked has gotten bought by somebody.
Correct.
So it's kind of interesting. I mean, we broke up AT&T, stay away from the monopoly, and then immediately all these little companies start buying each other.
Absolutely.
To make another big company.
Yeah.
But you ended up starting Nuvox.
Well,
Is that right?
Well, Russell Powell and I first went to a company called BTI, Best There Is,
Okay.
in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we got brought there because they said they wanted to build a channel. And after about 3 months, we quickly realized they really didn't understand what that meant.
Okay.
And one Friday night, Russell and I they'd given us these company cars, and we were racing each other back from Raleigh, North Carolina to Greenville. And we were talking on the phone about how miserable we were. This wasn't what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And Shay Hauser talked to Russell and I the next day, and he and his brother Charles had made the decision they were starting Nuvox. And so Russell and I jumped in, and it kind of went from there.
Okay. So y'all started Nuvox. And how long was Nuvox a private company?
It was probably, I'll probably get this wrong, John, but I think it was 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And if you remember at the time, some of those guys you mentioned earlier, David Hudson and Eddie Terrell had spun off and started a company called New South.
Yeah.
And kind of the younger guys at CTG, Russell Powell and Matt Smith and I and Shay and Charles did Nuvox.
Yeah.
And Ted ended up joining us too.
Yeah. And what was your role at Nuvox?
Well, it changed a lot. At first I was doing direct sales, indirect sales, marketing, and I was finding all the real estate. So it was a crazy, crazy time, because we were basically opening one office a month. And it was wide open, but God, it was fun. I wouldn't change those days for anything in the world. And one of the things you and I were talking about last week was, when you find great people, they tend to bring a lot of people with them. And we learned that experience that I couldn't do all that stuff I was doing. So the channel was where my real passion was. Yeah. And so we found a guy named Jim Dunn who had a bunch of industry experience, and Jim was totally focused on direct sales. We bought him in, and he bought like 35 people in less than a month.
What?
They were all just direct sales studs, and so it really helped springboard us.
Where did he come from?
He was at a company, I think he was at Earthlink at the time.
And he bought 30-something people with him? Wow.
And he bought a lot of people that have known over the years. I mean, Tim Cope is one of them, and several others. Stephen Rick.
And so you built Nuvox up for 6 or 7 years, and then y'all sold that one to Windstream.
We first merged with a couple of great companies. New South, a company that has the CTG people. A company called Florida Digital Network was where I got to meet Mike Gallagher, who's a great guy and a great friend. And that company stayed together for 3 or 4 years. And then we sold to Windstream Communications.
Okay. And I remember this part, but when you were at Windstream, you were in charge of all the distribution, all the distributors, all the agents, right?
Yes.
And so your number, I was always impressed by this, your number you were responsible for every year was over $1 billion, all going through the channel.
Yep. We eventually we were doing about $3 billion.
$3 billion.
And we were adding on, it's about $100,000 a month in net new business, which in our business, if it's $100,000 a month, they normally sign a 3 to 5 year contract.
Yeah.
So it kind of grows from there.
Okay.
And that was a fun experience for the first, it's going to sound redundant, but the first 5 years or so, because they totally left us alone.
Yeah.
And we'd never have money. We never had money to spend on marketing stuff or shows. So we had to get real creative, and I could spend a couple hours talking about that because it was so much fun how we creatively spent money. But Windstream came in and wanted to build a brand, and they were a sleepy ILEC company that just had the rural telephone areas where there's no competition. So they wanted to grow by acquiring CLEX, which was what we were.
Yeah.
And we bought 4 or 5 with them.
And so you running that big number, that big distribution number, what was different about that than all those scrappy little growth companies you'd been with before?
I think it just made it easier because we had money to entertain people.
Yeah.
And we were used to like going to the shows and being at the bar when all our competitors were, they'd come to the bar and take all our big customers out to fancy dinners on cruises and stuff, around the New York Harbor or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And we'd stay at the bar. We'd go have pizza,
That was your trade show booth, was the bar?
And then we'd come back when we knew they were coming back from these dinners, we'd be there, have the bartender paid off pretty much, where we could take care of the customers.
Yeah, interesting. And so, but when you got at Windstream with that big number, you were able to spend the money and do the stuff.
But there were challenges as well because the Windstream core group didn't understand the channel.
Yeah.
And so they'd look at the numbers and see how much each channel manager was producing per month.
Right.
And let's just say I had 2 channel managers in Atlanta. They would decide we need to put 5 or 6. And I'd be like, no. There's not an agent tree where we can just go pick them. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
We're very productive, but you can't throw too many bodies at it.
Right. Because they'll go somewhere else, right?
Well, and you can throw bodies at it, but we'd say we want more engineers. Because at the end of the day, that's what the salespeople need help with is the engineer piece.
Yeah. Well, then Windstream, did it get bought before you left, or was it just a
No,
change?
Windstream's still there now.
It was a change in CEO or something. Something happened.
It's a long story, John, but they hired a consulting group because of a mistake that was made.
Yeah.
And consulting group is an interesting buzzword.
Yeah.
I know the guy you talked to a little while ago, Peter Barth, is an awesome guy, was at Harvard.
Yeah.
Well, most consultants I've talked to over the years went somewhere like Harvard, and they've got their MBA, and they've got their law degree from Harvard, but they've never been out in the real world, and so they wanted us to do things that I didn't think were right.
So, after a good 6 years or so, you left for yet another startup with some of the same characters, some of the same Hauser family, Charles and Shay
and Charlie.
And Charlie.
And Keith Coker.
Yeah, and Keith Coker. And you started Green Cloud Technologies.
Well, they had started it. They were about 3 months in when I jumped on board.
And they brought you in as president.
Correct.
And that was the first time, if I'm not mistaken, you've been a president versus like a head of sales.
Absolutely.
How was that?
It was mind-boggling, I think I'd say. It was challenging.
Yeah.
It made me realize that salespeople couldn't go out and just sell stuff, that people had to actually install it. Because I'd never really thought through all that. I'd just been
all of a sudden you're in charge of the installers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because one of the guys there was like, Dan, that we can't just sell anymore. You got to think about this other stuff. And so it was good. And we were in the cloud space probably a little bit early. And we eventually they ended up being very successful and doing very well. But we had to do a lot of pivoting because our traditional agents that we'd worked with for 20-something years at the time, they just weren't ready for it.
Yeah. Who was the good agent for this?
A managed service provider.
An MSP?
Yeah, an MSP.
Okay, so somebody who's already managing the technology for an office.
Yeah, they're servers for an office. The computer servers you see in a closet somewhere.
And you would say, well, we'll add this cloud security service to the MSP's offering.
Correct, and they really liked it because we could private label bill it for them, and we were a Cisco certified cloud provider, And so they could sell it as whatever MSP, right, and use their own brand,
Yeah.
and put the cloud piece on their own bill,
Yeah.
and just put it as another line item.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a risk as much for the end user because it was Cisco certified. I mean, nobody gets fired for
Yeah.
buying Cisco.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the gold standard.
So y'all got ahead of that wave. It's very, very popular now, of course. And y'all eventually, Green Cloud eventually got sold for, it was a good deal for everyone, right?
Yeah. I was gone by then, but they did, and they did a phenomenal job
Yeah.
of making that happen.
Well, it is amazing. I mean, you're part of the story, but you know, with the Hausers, they've started up and sold or merged or whatever 4 or 5 different telecom
Absolutely.
companies since it started. So it's been pretty amazing to watch that, and I'm glad you've been a part of it. So you have a big shift happen after Green Cloud, because I remember you got a call out of the blue from our friend Mike Bauer at ScanSource, who said, I want to get into the, I'll call it the telecom world, the cloud, this world, and start selling this kind of telecom stuff through our VARs, to the people that are already selling people the hardware.
Yep.
It makes perfect sense. It's like the Reese's cup, right? I mean,
Yep.
the peanut butter and the chocolate. And he asked a few people who he should talk to about it, and they all said Dan Sterling.
The main one, though, is Randy McDougal.
Randy
I don't know if
McDougal.
y'all know Randy McDougal at Carolina Triathlon, but
Yeah.
Randy used to work with us at Nuvox and before that at CTG. And Mike and his wife were in there buying a bike, and he starts asking Randy about some of these. They called them master agents at the time, and now they're called TSDs. But you know, do you know anybody who knows these guys?
Yeah.
And Randy goes, the guy you need to talk to is Dan Sterling. And Mike goes, God, I should have thought about that. And so that's when I got a call from him.
Yeah. And he shows you his list of the top 10 of these type of providers that he'd like to discuss. He said, do you know any of them? And you said, I know all of them.
Yeah. They were my biggest customers.
Yeah. And then you also knew the right one to pick and who their owner was.
Correct.
And within a couple of weeks, y'all were meeting with him up in New York?
Well, me being the type A that I am,
Yeah.
I said, I think you got to talk to this one right here, and I'll call him right now. And he goes, no, I'm a publicly traded company. I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I laughed with Mike because I said, Mike, you realize I've been trying to get you to sell this stuff for a long time. And John, you probably don't remember this, but the last time he told me no was up at our parents' mountain house
Oh, really?
in Flat Rock, North Carolina.
Really?
And I asked him, I said, Mike, why won't you sell this? He goes, Dan, don't ever bring that up again. We're a hardware distribution company. That's a distraction. But it's worked out great.
Yeah, you know, long sell cycle.
Yeah.
Long sell
Yeah.
cycle. But it did work out, and you helped them meet the guy and get the deal done. So they bought the biggest distributor of this type, or
Yeah.
supplier of this type of telephone, internet, cloud, all that stuff. And the idea was ScanSource does billions of dollars a year in hardware sales. Things like scanners,
Yep.
things like that, you know.
Security cameras,
Security
scanners,
cameras, yeah.
hardware, physically hardware phones.
Right. And let's get them, instead of just selling the hardware and making a margin and going on to next month, let's sell the scanner and connect it to some kind of internet service, make it live, and not only get the commission here, but create this annuity on this stuff here, right? Okay. So once they got that deal done, it makes all the sense in the world. It's not easy to get all these thousands of ScanSource VARs to do that immediately. And so they said, we want you to stay and help us figure that out. And you had a small team of people, you're working with the biggest VARs and teaching them how to do this. And the common refrain, as I recall, from a ScanSource VAR was, we don't want to mess with it, we're too busy, we don't want to mess up one of our deals with this, right?
It's kind of like that. Most of them would say, we agree we ought to do this.
Yeah.
But then they wouldn't necessarily do it. And it was mainly because their sales team didn't understand it necessarily. And they were very concerned that if they did do this, it could mess up their core deal.
Right.
Which is where they're used to making their money.
Right, and I get that. But sometimes you're just too busy doing your thing and making if you got to make your number every quarter and you got a way to do it, you don't want to distract yourself with something else. But it is nice when you say, every time I sell a deal, for every one time out of three, I can add this annuity to it.
It is, and one of the challenges that we had to overcome there is getting the ScanSource customers to understand how they pay their sales reps.
Yeah.
Because they're used to paying them one time.
Yeah.
And so if you tell them you're going to pay them one time on something that bills $10,000 a month and it's X percentage, that doesn't look like very much.
Yeah.
So you got to get them to agree to pay them either a big lump sum and realize the customer's locked in for 3 to 5 years, or you got to get them to pay a little bit of the monthly residual they get over time. And it's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
And kind of the way I try to explain it to them is, let's train your sales guys on how if they've got a $500 a month car payment, how do we make it where they can eliminate that car payment by this residual income? And then we go into their house payment, and then we keep growing it from there.
Well, in the SaaS world, the software world, we struggle with that too, Dan. When we're switching from license sales to an annuity subscription kind of sale, the way it normally runs now is whatever length of time you get your customer to commit to, 2 year, 3 year, whatever, where they can't get out of it, a contract, they'll pay the rep. And they'll say, we're going to pay you, your commission right now for this length of time. And then that's your customer. And your job now is to start working on what happens in 2 years.
Yep, absolutely.
We make it a 3 year deal. Can we make it twice as big? Can we, and so the rep stays very involved, but we just pay them and move on. But anyway, so you started working some of the low hanging fruit ScanSource crossover deals, and you've done that for the last 5 or 6 years, right? And I know one of them was something, we can't say who the customer was, but it was a big shipping company, and this was putting thousands of scanners in their facilities, right?
Absolutely.
So let's just run through the deal. If let's say I'm the VAR for ScanSource, and I'm the one who's going to sell these scanners to this company, and let's just say there's 1,000 scanners, and the scanners all cost $1,000 a piece. How much is that? Is that $1 million? 1,000 times 1,000? I think that's $1 million.
Sounds right.
I don't know how much it is.
Well, the beauty of the deal you're talking about was this particular ScanSource customer had never sold any services before.
Okay.
They were in a large deal that the margins on the hardware had gotten so compressed they weren't sure how they were going to make it work.
Yeah.
But it was a big name brand, and they didn't want to lose the customer. And one of the greatest people I ever met, Bob Krosky at ScanSource, he's walking in the hall one day and says, I know you sell these services, but is there any way the services can go with what I sell? And I said, what do you sell? And he pulled out this Zebra device, which I'd never seen this Zebra device in my life. And I said, what does that Zebra device do? And he says, well, when they scan a package, when they're delivering it, they scan it, and it goes back to let the customer get the email and know they got it. And I said, okay. I said, how does that connectivity work? He goes, I've got no idea. And so he called a customer and said, how does that connectivity work? And he said, well, we called T-Mobile, Verizon, and Sprint with the customer, and they pick one, and they put it in there. And I said, Bob, ask him how the experience is. And he said, they said the experience is awful. And I said, why? And it took me right back to the telecom days. Because the hardware provider, Zebra, would blame, say, Verizon, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so we came up with a great solution for that. It made that particular ScanSource customer is making about $56,000 a month on this,
Every month.
this one deal right now, and it's growing.
So this customer is making $56,000 a month just on the subscription part of this.
Correct.
They already made the margin on the hardware.
Correct.
And that will probably grow every month as we get more scanners.
Yes.
And most of the VARs are leaving that on the table.
Correct.
So
correct.
your job has been to educate them and get them going. And you've done a lot of that over the last 5 years. But, you've done so much of it that I think that they're comfortable that the VARs kind of get the deal now. That they understand
It's growing. It's growing every month. And it's not just the scanners. It's when Avaya sells a phone system, or do we get them to the Avaya cloud, or there's all kind of different stuff like that.
Or a camera system.
Yeah, camera.
Doing cloud backup or something.
Exactly.
So you've learned a lot about how to not just work with these telecom cloud distributors, but also how to cross-sell to the VARs, which leads us to what you're doing now. So you have left ScanSource.
Correct.
and you're now doing the same thing you've been doing, but you're just doing it independently, right?
Correct.
So any VAR out there that wants your help in creating these annuities, you kind of know both sides of the equation, and you can help them do it. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm talking to some of the people I've worked with in the past
Yeah.
about, do you want me to continue helping you or not? And then I'm also talking to people about going back into the supplier world
Yeah.
as a channel chief or
Yeah.
sales leader.
So I mean, if somebody, wanted to hire you as what you've traditionally done, this VP, channel chief, distributor thing, I know you'd look at that. But in the meantime, you've got these customers that, I mean, the way it works, as I understand it, is they either pay you some kind of retainer to
Yep.
help train their salespeople, or maybe a retainer plus your company and their company splits the commissions.
Correct.
So they have very little risk.
Correct.
Okay. I know my son Jack, or your nephew, did that with a firm in Arizona when he started his agency
Absolutely.
business. He had a veteran show them, these are the good deals. This is how it's structured.
And Jack still calls me today and
Yeah.
says, this is the deal I'm in. And if it's a deal that I know is above Jack right now, because he's 4 years into this now, I'll say, Jack, might be one that you talk to your friends in Phoenix about.
Yeah.
Because Jack tends to focus on the security piece, and if it's a real complex data solution, he usually needs some help on that one.
So walk me through again, ideally, how it would work if you had a VAR that sold hardware and they said, hey, I want to figure out how to do the subscription thing. Dan, how would you help me? What does the financial part of that look like?
Well, I've talked to a bunch of people about it different ways, like you said earlier. I mean, some of them want to pay me a retainer and make it 6 months or a year.
Yep.
Because I'm telling every one of them that I talk to, it's going to take you, unless you get lucky with some big customer like we talked about,
Yeah.
it's going to take you at least 3 years to build it up where there's scale, where you can make some money.
Yeah.
And that's an investment.
Yeah.
And so I'm real upfront with them about that. And I talk to them openly and honestly about what it's going to take. And if they don't want to commit to it, I'd rather just walk away as friends.
Yeah, and I think if I own the VAR, my starting point might be, Dan, I'm okay splitting the commission with you. Let's just share. Let's look at my customers and let's see if we can cherry pick and get a couple done.
Yeah, big ones.
Yeah, and then we can go to phase 2.
And that's what I usually tell them is, let's talk to your friendliest customers
Yeah.
that trust you the most.
Yeah.
And say, this is completely new to us of what you normally have bought from us.
Yeah.
But this is something else we do.
Okay. And if somebody wanted to talk about that with you,
Just give me a call.
These are people that already know you, or they
Yeah.
find you on LinkedIn or something.
And it's interesting. I'm having a lot of good conversations with agent friends of mine, because most of the agents that I've worked with over the past are used to selling services, and
Yeah.
they're calling me because they know I've got this experience in hardware now.
Yeah.
And they're saying, what kind of hardware can we sell? And ScanSource has tons of resources that can help these people as well.
Yeah.
But I could be another value add.
Yeah. ScanSource is such a cool company because for a couple of years you worked for ScanSource, but before that you were working with ScanSource, and now you're working with ScanSource.
absolutely.
I mean, it's
Well, ScanSource is great. They were great to me.
it's a great company. It's a great Greenville story. Switching gears, favorite sales teachers over the years.
I think Zig Ziglar has got to be one of the greatest ones.
Yeah.
And not just because he's my brother, but I think I was very lucky to have a brother who was 6 years ahead of me in sales that could tell me all the stuff not to do.
Yeah.
And I remember some of the early years when I'd tell John what I was doing, and he'd be like, "Wrong answer, wrong answer."
Well, it is. Listen, it's a good lesson for the noobs. Is find somebody, your brother or someone you trust, that's just a little ahead of you on the path.
Yeah.
5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Not someone who's like 40 years ahead of you. That's too far.
Yeah.
They need to be in a current path, kind of where
Well,
you.
and I think other than you and Zig and my buddy Leighton Cubbage has been a mentor of mine when it comes to sales.
Yeah,
and
me too.
He probably helped me the most when it came to just keeping it simple.
Yeah.
And just going next door. I mean,
Yeah.
don't let it affect you. If somebody doesn't want what you've got,
Yeah.
don't waste time. And Mr. Ben Keys, our dad's good friend, taught me that a lot as well. Don't sell the same thing over and over again that you never really sold.
Okay. And then what's your favorite book?
A book called Rhinoceros Success that you know well
Yeah.
by Scott Alexander.
Yeah.
It's a book that's, as you know, has really big letters
Yeah.
and lots of pictures. And so that's good for somebody like me. It keeps it real simple. And it basically boils down to you're going to get some thorns in your rear end every once in a while.
Yeah.
And so just, pluck them out and
Yeah.
keep on going and
Yeah.
wake up, go to bed at night.
Yeah.
And wake up and just start all over. And
Yeah.
in sales, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's hard effort,
Yeah.
hard work and effort and enthusiasm. But I was talking to my friend Daniel before we came in here today, and he was talking about sales, and I was like, well, it's really about listening. Sales is more about listening than talking.
Yeah.
Because you've got to find out where their pain points are, and then make sure they've got a budget. And then if you got the right solution,
Yeah.
it's going to sell itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're talking as a salesperson, there's no way you can hear them say anything of value because
No.
you're talking. But if they're talking, they might tell you where their budget is or what their problem is, or so. Yeah, I mean,
The other thing I think the noobs would like to hear about selling stuff is a lot of times salespeople, they get excited
Yeah.
when the person says yes.
yeah,
That's when you definitely don't talk anymore. Once you get the yes, it's like
Well,
the
we're all-
sale's done. It's
all
over.
done here.
You're gonna sell him out of it if you
yeah,
keep talking.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay, favorite band.
Well, don't tell Edwin McCain, and Edwin, if you are listening, I'm sorry, but it's got to be right now Jimmy Buffett.
Oh, that's
What a
good.
classic.
Classic. Favorite word.
Well, I'm going to pretend and use my accent to make this one word, but it's super fantastic.
Okay.
And I choose that word because I think in life you have a choice. Our parents always taught us, mainly our mom, we turned lemons into lemonade. And I think that word super fantastic sums that up because, you never know what somebody's going through in their life because everybody's going through it.
Yeah.
But if you just have a great positive attitude, you're going to end up getting where you want to go.
That's a good word. Ted Hassel would agree with
Absolutely.
you on that. Well, I'm glad for your new venture. I think it's interesting because it's pretty much the same thing you've been doing, just without any supervision. You can just do whatever you want. But you can help these VARs do a better job servicing their customer, and they can make more money for themselves and their salespeople. So,
But I still want to keep coming back because I am having lots of conversations with some of these supplier friends of mine that are trying to build a channel.
yeah, either one.
And a lot of those need a lot of help.
Maybe some of both.
Yeah, you never know.
I don't know. Well, thanks for coming back.
Absolutely.
Look forward to having you back on podcast number 3 when it's time. But we enjoy watching your wild path through telecom. It just keeps getting more interesting. So
It does.
thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right.